Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. If you're looking for PTCGO codes, including the new Rebel Clash stuff, go ahead and check out the Potown store. You can get a 5% discount on your orders using that code OmniPoke. For today's video, we are looking at the 16 players who competed in the Limitless Invitational, including myself down towards the bottom, as well as the, 4 of the lists that we've seen from the Players' Cup Kickoff Invitational. Both were streamed last weekend, and we got to see Tord Reklev winning yet another tournament with Dragapult, and we saw a very interesting Spiritomb Beast finals in the Limitless Invitational, which was pretty interesting to see. So lots to discuss here. This really does kind of wrap a nice bow around Ultra Prism to Rebel Clash, and we can start moving towards the Darkness Ablaze stuff. I think really the only stuff that's relevant left in this format is anyone trying to play in the actual Players' Cup and grind out tournaments, but we know that typically you just want to pick fast aggressive decks for that to just ramp a bunch of points on at once. Apologies as well, guys, if I'm stumbling on my words or if I sound nasally. It's because I am dying of hay fever right now. So I'm going to try and keep this quite brief for my own sake. And for yours, I guess, so you don't have to hear me sniffling all the time. So, even though some of the players, like myself, didn't do too great, I still think like these are all going to be decent lists to look at, because these players all did very well to even get to the Invitational in the first place. So they've got a good building background, they're good players, so at least you can get some more up-to-date lists based on what we expected going into this tournament, based on sort of like Q3 and Q4, those sorts of results. There clearly was some metagaming going on here, and we'll get onto that when we look at the Spiritomb lists exactly. But I think that could be a good talking point for us moving on into this format, and if you're playing in these Players' Cup tournaments, what you might want to change with some of these lists. So we'll start towards the bottom and work our way up. Chip decided to play Control for this tournament. He didn't end up doing all that well. I think most people would have expected him to play Dragapult for the amount of testing he'd done on it through his stream and stuff. And I know he is grinding Player Cup points, and he's been using Dragapult the whole time. So it was a bit of a wacky choice from him. I think in hindsight, he kind of regrets it from what I could see from his most recent video, just because he wasn't super comfortable with this list. So he kind of took a risk, obviously, compared to the best of one format in all the qualifiers that only were 30 minutes. This is very different of a tournament because it was best of 3 untimed. So I think he was trying to take advantage of having a slower game plan and really surprising people with Control, because it had slid down the tier list in the Rebel Clash meta, especially as Dragapult got more popular and as Pikarom started to have, 13, 14 energy counts. It became difficult. And I think Chip did face Dragapult round 1, which doesn't help him at all. And I can't remember what he faced round 2, but I don't think his matchup spread is actually... Like, the Control matchup spread isn't great, so it didn't surprise me that it didn't do well. But he could have run into a better day. I played a bog standard Pikarom. No real thrills here at all. I had a thin tag call package. This 3 count of tag switch is actually wrong. That's 1 tag switch and 2 tag calls. So it's just been posted wrong on the website. I can talk to Robin about that later. But yeah, a real no-thrills Pikarom list. I actually had a very close series against Luke Morsa, where I had a reset stamp tag bolt play in game 1, and he hit a 1 of 28 cards to beat me with his boss's orders. The only other way I lose that game 1 is if he rips Research / Marnie, and then is able to hit Zigzagoon double scoop net, or double Zigzagoon scoop net plus attachment, and it had to be a rainbow, I think. So yeah, pretty unfortunate loss against Morsa in the first round. But games 2 and 3, so game 2 I was able to win, and game 3 I pretty much got bodied. He was able to get Buzz turn off and did it on a Gust play whilst also knocking out the active. I do think Spiritomb Beast in general is quite favoured against Pikarom. Interestingly enough, the night before, I was very, very close to playing a Circuitry GX. I was considering Spiritomb Beast myself for the tournament. I've tested it a lot on stream over the last couple of weeks. I haven't done a profile of it yet, but obviously there's a lot more reason to now that it's done so well. My list was quite different from the two who have placed at the top, Kevin and Luke's, but I thought it was definitely interesting, and I thought some people would be bringing it. I actually expected Ross and Luke to be bringing that deck to the tournament, so I was thinking about playing the Circuitry. Ended up cutting it in the end, but I think going forward, if you're playing Pikarom, definitely add a Circuitry GX. It's going to be broken, I think. If people net deck Spiritomb, and if you're a Spiritomb player, drop an Aurora for a Dark Energy so you don't just get walled. So there might be a small interaction for Pikarom and Spiritomb going forward. We see Dragapult here. From Avi Lashan, and again, it looks relatively straightforward. It's a Crushing Hammer list. Power Plant has been introduced. Now, it's interesting when you look towards the Players' Cup lists. Do bear in mind this tournament happened a few weeks prior to actually like sort of going live and being sort of brought to the world. So in many ways, these lists that you're seeing in the Limitless Invitational are more up-to-date lists than the ones you'll see here. That's not to say these are worse lists, but just these ones have reacted to the previous two Limitless qualifiers where this one hadn't really. So something to bear in mind there. But yeah, a pretty straightforward list. Interesting to see only one Boss's Orders and one Great Catcher, so a little bit low on the Gust side, especially with no Fione. But outside of that, nothing too surprising. Playing Energy Spinners just for searchable outs via the Stellar Wish. Which is, I think, nice compared to just having a physical 10 count. That definitely makes a lot of sense when you're not playing Viridian. I kind of do like that option for sure. And when you are in mirror matches, it's really nice to have just a basic energy card so you don't get hurt by opponents' Giratinas. So yeah, some interesting choices there. But other than that, pretty straightforward. I think we've seen more and more Dragapults add in Reset Stamp alongside that Power Plant as well. Kim Pavega also playing Pikarom. Pikarom didn't do well in the tournament at all, really. I think with the amount of Spiritomb Beasts and Baby Blacephalon, it's quite reasonable to see why it did so poorly. Especially Kim's list, it's very built towards beating Dragapult, I would say, and also potentially Mirror, because it's playing a double Malolana. So I think he was expecting a lot more Dragapult than actually turned up in the event, so that's a little bit of a shame for him. Outside of that, it looks relatively similar to what I kind of played. Instead of the Volkners, he is playing Marnies and just playing one Reset Stamp, so trying to be more proactive with Disruption, which is definitely reasonable when you're expecting Baby Blacephalon. Outside of that, nothing too exciting there. Also, just opt to play 3 Switch just because you have the Air Balloon rather than 4 in 1, but nothing too outlandish there at all. Dominic Maliki was playing Baby Blacephalon, and he has a pretty straightforward build once again. We see the Zigzagoon. It's somewhat of like a mirror tech, so you can crab around additional things. Not only a mirror tech, it can actually like target a bunch of other things that sit on the bench. But it can also help reduce that Fireball Circus. I've kind of undersold how good that card can be. I've seen it be a lot more situationally strong recently, so I actually am kind of like a low-key fan of the Zigzagoon when you have a lot of scoop-up nets. Outside of that, very straightforward list. Nothing too much to say on that front. It was playing one Great Catcher as the only form of Gust. But it's not the only Baby Blacephalon that we see in the tournament. Ross Cortham went away from his trusty ADP list to just go down the Spiritomb Beast lists. And it feels like a lot of people were on this sort of hype. I do like the counts that he's gone for here. The 4 Hustle Belt, as well as the Lana's Fishing Rod, I think is a really big deal. I think it's actually super important against Dragapult players to have 4 Hustle Belts available to you because they are so important to hit all in one turn. You got to put down a Spiritomb, a Rainbow, a Hustle Belt, and do a bunch of Jinx shenanigans all at once. So 4 Hustle Belt is Ross's way of being able to beat Dragapult players, even under like the pressure of Marnies and the pressure of Reset Stamps as well. I think that's also why you see such a high Acrobite count. He's only playing a couple scoop up nets, really just to give yourself extra Stellar Wish options, and I think this is where it differs massively from the other 2 Spiritomb players, where they're much more reliant on scoop up net. If I was going to have played a Spiritomb list, it would have been more similar to this list. It had, I think mine had 3 scoop up nets, but no Zigzagoon, Yveltal shenanigans. I would have played a Nihiligo, and I possibly would have played an Oricorio. I was kind of flip-flopping back and forth on that. A few other interesting counts is that there's 2 Tool Scrappers, so I think very aware of Zacian's presence, having Frying Pans potentially. Obviously, Goggles was banned for this tournament, but It certainly is important to be able to one-shot Zacians, especially when they have the potential to take additional prize cards against you with good old Jirachi Prism Star, so you have to deal with those threats immediately. So the double Tool Scrapper, I believe, is mainly in here for Zacian, but obviously it also helps against like Pikarom and stuff like that. So yeah, a few interesting counts there, but I believe more people will look towards the first and second place lists, so something to bear in mind. Gabor was playing Dragapult once again. It's also a Power Plant Hammer based list. These are much less consistent 60s than the list Tord played recently, but the power of Crushing Hammer in Mirror, again, I think so many people are expecting Dragapult to be like 3 or 4 plus players in the tournament playing it, that everyone had that on their mind, so I think Crushing Hammer, a pretty big card for that for sure. Also, there's the Power Plants, obviously, for Pikarom, and the Stamps being incorporated in. This list also going down to just the one boss, one great catcher, so really just relying on allowing your bench spread to do the work. I'm surprised to see such a low amount of Gust, and as we see Tord's list later on, it has far more Gust, so something to bear in mind. Also, it looks like a lot of Dragon Ball players have taken Fion out of their 60s for whatever reason. This list also going for the spinners, and I'm a big advocate of that. So yeah, only playing the one Zigzagoon, not playing the Distortion Door Giratina or a second copy. Normally you see 2 spaces dedicated to this list for extra damage placement. So that's a small intriguing thing, but that's really it. Joshua, no surprise here, he's playing Baby Blacephalon, as he's used the entire time to get into the Invitational in the first place. And it's the list that he's always favoured, the Acrobike list over the Scoop Up Nets. It's still playing Beastbringer. He used that against me and bodied me, so it still has value against Pikarom, that's for sure. Not sure how much value it has against anything else in the format, but if you want to beat Pikarom, and obviously Pikarom's still a really big deck in the format, don't get it twisted. Yeah, that's still an include. I would have expected most people to have dropped Beastbringer for this tournament, so it was a little bit painful to come up against it for sure. Catron sticks with Dragapult. This time he's upped from 7 energy to 8, and he's cut his Zamazenta, but he has got some other spice in here. He has the Gengar Mimikyu for Horror House GX players, which is interesting, going straight into Poltergeist, maybe trying to punish some Zacian players who just sit Intrepid Swording and growing big hand sizes. I can definitely expect that to be one of the reasons why he plays it. Outside of that, just another straightforward shell. I am a big fan of the Fion alongside the one boss, one great catcher. I do think that's pretty correct. 3 reset stamps is a very high count, and that's more than anyone else, so that's interesting. Most people, I would imagine, would expect Marnie to be in here instead. Instead, he's going for like early game consistency draw of the Quad Cynthia instead, and offsetting that with a high reset stamp count. I'm surprised to not just see like 2 copies plus 1 Marnie, because it's just an overall additional supporter card, and that's probably what I would lean towards. But man, everyone is playing Spinner in this list. It seems like that's the new norm for Dragapult, to play a physical low count of energy, but Spinner just giving you Stellar Wish access, and that does make a lot of sense, so that's very cool. Taketo was playing Zacian. By the way, Catron onwards now are in the points. They're, well, not in the points, but in the prizes. So anyone who made top 8 started to get prizes, and it scaled upwards, obviously. So Catron and Taketo did well to place in the tournament, basically in top 8. Here we are seeing him once again stick with his Turbozation, this time adding in Hooper instead of his Mawile GX, possibly not expecting any whatchamacallums, Obstagoons, which makes some sense. Also, Hooper just being like a strong card in the meta, maybe expecting like mirrors and stuff like that. Certainly can be reasonable, good against Dragapult in the early turns potentially as well. Sticking with the Sonya based build, so very similar to what his initial 60 was in terms of counts across the board. Really all I'm seeing is the difference of the Hooper edition, and I can't remember if he was playing Mew or not previously, but it's something that is in the list nonetheless, and that's no surprise at all really. Axel was playing Luke Metal Zacian, kind of a counter pick to regular Turbo Zacian. I think that's kind of the main reason we're seeing it do well. Also with a double Mallow Lana as well, being very strong against Dragapult, so targeting Turbozation and Draga, no bad thing. A lot of them turned up to the tournament. The 3 Frying Pans, the Quad Crushing, also playing the promo Apom. You can get this promo from the arena battle decks, I think they're called. So it's like a Persian kind of play, but you don't have to evolve. So yeah, interesting little APOM. You can get that in the Pikarom deck, I believe it is. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but yeah. So basically just taking away the kind of like Jirachi Prism gimmick, which isn't a gimmick, we know is good, but instead replacing that with energy disruption, denial, healing options, and resource denial with the APOM. Very interesting to see that card see some play out the gate. Also going for the power plant option, so everyone trying to target Pikarom pretty heavily with those power plants, and the amount of use we've seen there is pretty crazy overall. Oliver was playing ADP-zation, so bringing that back. This was his old faithful. I believe he won one of the invitationals with this 60, or with the deck itself. Not necessarily the 60, because we're seeing a Zamazenta thrown in. So again, it seemed like a lot of people were targeting Draga and Pika for this tournament. It felt like they were the two public enemies, and it's no surprise there, really. ADP serving him well, I think, for the most part, for the amount of one-prize decks are in this tournament. The ADP list has a far superior Blacephalon and Spiritomb matchup compared to just pure Turbozation, I would hedge. Also, just having that 30 damage buff is super important in Zacian mirrors now, because you get through their frying pans a lot easier. So, well, you nullify them basically with your hidden damage buff, so that's very cool. He's playing an Order Pad 60 with energy switches and acrobikes, so man, he was trying to pop off with the Alter Creation whenever he could. So certainly a scary list, trying to really just have the early game blitz of Alter Creation. I'm wondering now if he would have chosen to go second every game. It feels like with an Order Pad list, you basically... I mean, it's so good to go first as ADP-zation, but you're playing Order Pads, do you just think it's good enough to... Man, I don't know. I'll have to watch back some of his gameplay. But yeah, super interesting list for sure to see the updated ADP list, because I still believe it has a lot of legs. I think inherently you're fairly strong against Pikarom. You're at least 50-50 against Pikarom. With the addition of Malolana, I think you're reasonable, especially with Zamazenta. I think you should be definitely reasonable against Dragapult. And like I said, that ADP GX attack is still so solid against like likes of Spiritomb and stuff like that. Obviously, we saw some of the Spiritomb players use Yveltal GX to their advantage to get through an ADP all at once. So that's kind of the way around it in the argument for Spiritomb players. But man, that can be a big risk, and you've got to still draw pretty hot to get that. So ADP making a minor comeback, which doesn't make a big surprise. Aaron was the farthest placing Pikarom, and he was once again playing a tag call list. Actually looks very similar to mine, to be honest. Plays a Mew, potentially for Mirror, and for Cramorant snipes, which is pretty reasonable. Also playing... Okay, so it's playing the Marnie package instead of the Volkners alongside the tag call package, but everything else looks very, very similar to mine overall. So that seems to be like the new norm, kind of mini tag call package. I think Kim did kind of overdo it with the tag call essence just by trying to like hard win Dragapult. But I think I didn't really use Malolana like at all during the tournament, but it's like important enough against Dragapult that you can try and use it even with an Eldegoss at times. I think that's probably the best policy going forward, and it seems like these players are benefiting from Marnie, giving yourself a slightly closer Baby Blounds matchup, which makes a lot of sense. So yeah, Pikarom's still a reasonable deck. Azul stuck with Turbozation, and he's just tried to vanilla it as much as possible. He's again swapped out the potential Mawile. I don't think he even played Mawile last time, but he's added a Zamazenta to improve. Again, Dragapult is always the key term there. Stuck with Dustmane as his backup. Got the high boss orders count and one great catcher. Stuck with Friend Ball, stuck with a quad Acrobike. But yeah, a very streamlined Turbozation. Interesting to see that he didn't play any tools of his own. I was expecting, when I was trying to figure out Turbozation, because again, one of the top picks of the tournament, obviously, and one of the decks I've had the most experience with, I was trying desperately to make spaces for like 2 frying pans, and I was having to make some like ugly cuts, I guess, and I think Azul just said, you know what, Mirror's probably going to play 1 copy of Tool Scrapper anyways, let's try and just go as straightforward as possible. Where Azul did kind of slip up is by not playing any Stadium whatsoever. and you'll see against Spiritomb, that is a no bueno option these days. I think you probably should be playing Shrines. I think 1 or 2 copies of Shrine, or at the very least 1 Chaotic Swell, possibly even a Marshadow if you want to. I think one of those is a mandatory now because of Black Market Prism Star. One of the main reasons why I was thinking of playing Spiritomb Beasts was exactly Azul's 60 from the previous qualifier, Qualifier 4, where he came second. I felt that was going to be the most net-decked Zacian list. And obviously everyone noticed that it didn't play a Stadium whatsoever. And even Takato's list only played 1 copy of Stadium. And it was a Shrine. So, like the other 2 Spiritomb players that we'll see in a second, you can heavily punish that with the likes of Black Market Prism Star. So certainly something to bear in mind. If you are picking up Turbozation, you've got to make a space for 1 to 2 Stadiums. That is my advice. Shrine is my preferred, but you can also go for Swell if you really want to. But yeah, we're going to see Spiritomb Beasts was dominant this tournament. Obviously, some Spiritomb did reasonably well in the previous, in Q4, but it seemed to just be like the low-key play going into this event. We start with Luke's 60, playing the double Zigzag and the Yveltal GX. I tried Yveltal Zigzag pretty early on in my Spiritomb testing, and I ultimately took it out of the list because I didn't find it consistent enough, and I wanted to commit those spaces to other things, but against things like Dragapult, it could be a decent option, just because you're not able to just freely put down Spiritombs, and it's an extra one-hit kill option that you have in the deck. And I think it's also good against those big tag teams that you simply can't reach, be it big charmed Pika-Roms or just like ADPs. So I think that's a big reason why the Yveltal's in the list. Also, just the fact that you play double Zigzagoon and quad Scoop Up Net means you're actually pretty decent in Spiritomb Mirror, and there's some weird interactions that can go back and forth between you. So the Zigzag Net thing possibly is good enough to keep just for Mirror alone, and keeps other Spiritomb players from being greedy with build spites. Obviously in the Mirror you don't need to build spite too much, because the damage that you need so often is minuscule to deal with your opponent's Spiritomb. But it can be something that just kind of goes haywire. If you find like a couple nets, a couple Zigzag all in one turn, you can just go crazy on them and get a free prize here and there. So something to bear in mind going forward for Spiritomb. Definitely something to be aware of in that mirror match. Don't build too much spite, or at the very least jinx it around as much as possible to not fall prey to a sort of option like that. Outside of that, we see Buzzwole, obviously insane for the Sledgehammer turn. I'm really surprised to see no Nihilego. I found Nihilego so strong whenever I was testing Spiritomb Beasts, but I guess it's the Yveltal package that takes that sort of space. Crogonal is also interesting. I saw him use it against Babylocephalon. You can actually like jinx towards your Crogonal and Hustlebelt Crogonal, and then you're frozen locking for a knockout on their Blound, and they can't use crystals to recover. So that can be strangely like disgusting against them, which is very cool. They can't like crystal or flint or whatever to get the next Blound rolling, and that can be disgusting. Also, it's good against control matchups. So yeah, Crogonal, an interesting option for sure. He's got the A-Spec Great Ball, which I'm happy to see at the very least. And yeah, he's playing 1 Shrine, 1 Black Market. Personally, I would like an extra Stadium here as well, because I think Shrine is still integral for the Pika-Rom matchup. And also, if you play a 3rd copy of Stadium in general, you have a higher chance of Black Market just sticking and being a late game threat against them. I think most Pika-Roms, I think all the Pika-Roms that we saw played Stadium plus Marshadow, that was it. So if you play a 3rd copy of Stadium, it's going to serve you well. One thing to note, obviously, I've mentioned it earlier, no copies of Basic Energy whatsoever. So yeah, add a Basic Energy in. It's going to be an important card going forward, otherwise you just get walled out by a low-end Persian GX or Circuitry. So yeah, something to bear in mind for sure. But that's about it, really. And then we're going to see Kevin's 60 that actually took down the whole event in the mirror. Again, not too different here. This time just playing 1 Zigzagoon, and it has Adventure Bag in here as an additional out to your tools, which I'm a big fan of for filtering, and it is playing that 3rd Stadium. So yeah, I hadn't even looked at Kevin's list and I was talking about this Stadium count, and I much prefer this 60 in terms of the Stadium count. So yeah, I'm more of a fan of this list. Interestingly though, I dislike the Yveltal even more in the 60 when you only play 1 Zigzagoon, because it makes you, basically forces you to use Yveltal only against GX decks where they've already had Shrine ticks put down, because it's very rare you'll be able to tantrum your way through anything else. So I'd like to see the effectiveness of the Yveltal. I think it's probably one of the weaker cards in the deck, from my personal opinion. But outside of that, yeah, Spiritomb seemed to be the low-key busted deck as we developed through this format, as people playtested the Dragapult matchup more, got more comfortable with it. It seemed to be a goer, and it seemed to be good enough with its matchup spread to do very well. So very interesting going forward. I think if your Spiritomb play 3 Stadium total, including that black market, and add 1 to 2 basic energy, at the very least play 1 basic energy plus super rod or ordinary rod. Yeah, that's like the minimum, I would say. If you're Turbozation, you have to add Stadiums yourself. And I think that's just about it. Dragapult players, do what you want. It's still doing fine in all different methods. Speaking of Dragapult in all different methods, we're seeing Tord's winning list from the Exhibition Invitational that they had for the Players' Cup that's currently ongoing for this month. We're in the middle of the month right now, so you can still get started in it and have a good run and make your way to a decent placement for sure. And Tord played the most bog-standard Dragapult you'll ever see. You'll love to see it. Tord really has stripped the list back and made it as simplistic as possible. It's normally his forte to make things simple and make them work as much as possible, and that's like exactly what this list is all about. It's playing the 4th Jirachi that you oftentimes just see 3 copies of, playing 4/4 Pult, you often see lower counts of that. It's playing the Spinners and the Acrobikes, so he's done the same thing with the ADP-zation, but with Dragapult as well, and he's playing high counts of Research, Marnie, and Boss, seeing 3 physical Boss, no copies of Great Catcher whatsoever, just trying to boss whenever he can. Also Shrine, I think most people, when testing Dragapult earlier on, they did play those Shrines. I don't know if it will be changed towards Power Plants in future, but we actually saw how important those Shrine ticks were in a lot of matchups in those exhibition matches Tord had. You can go back on the Twitch, on the official Pokemon TCG Twitch, and I think they've also been uploaded to YouTube as well, so you can go ahead and check out those gameplays as well, commentated by official casters, so definitely worth a watch, because these are some of the best players in the game today, right now, in this tournament. Mahone came second with Baby Blacephalon. A small few tweaks with his list. Interesting to see Quad Energy Retrieval alongside Quad Fire Crystal. Normally you see this card as just like a 1 or 2 of. I think he's just got the 13 energy, sometimes you see 14, so maybe just a quick flip-flop there. Not too much else is that exciting. It's just playing the Scoop Up Net shenanigans that we've come to accept as like the most played list now. So yeah, the only thing that jumped out to me was the 4 energy retrieval as like a bit of a surprise, but that's really all. I think we've seen a lot of the Blacephalon list strip down their attackers as well. It's like just the GX and Cramorant now. We've sort of seen the Victinis fall away at the wayside. We see Pablo's top 4 Pikarom. This list is not playing Tag Call Package. Instead, it's the high Volkner count, the quad Volkner, and he's playing Wait and See Hammer. He mentioned in a post that this let him go first a lot, because I believe Decklists were public knowledge for the opponents, and it meant that opponents would choose to queue into him and allow Pablo to go first, which makes it a lot easier to full blitz on too, because you get just a physical attachment straight away, and you can just pass it over to the opponent. So as long as you get into one of your radars or quick balls, you get that Wait and See Hammer value. So this is a really interesting idea, especially when it's almost like you're taking advantage of public deck lists. So that's very cool. Interestingly, not playing any healing at all will probably make the Dragapult matchup a little bit more risque. Otherwise, very straightforward list, and Pikarom, like I said, it can still do well as the straightforward list. Fram also top forward with Baby Blounds. This list is playing the Victini, and is playing Eldegoss, so it's actually not playing the Scoop Up Net package whatsoever. It's just playing the Boss, the Great Catcher, playing no Power Pad, just Eldegoss. So this reminds me of Puka's 60 with Blacephalon that he played in either Q3 or Q4. It's also playing Beast Energy. So yeah, this really reminds me of Puka's list. But yeah, interesting nonetheless. Blound's doing well in all sorts of ways. Unfortunately, we don't see the other 4 players list, but again, you can check out some of their gameplay over at YouTube as well. So yeah, I talked for a lot longer than I expected. Hopefully my voice didn't annoy you guys too much, or my sniffling, anything like that, but I really am struggling through hay fever at the moment. It is lethal out here right now. But yeah, thanks so much for watching, guys. Let me know your thoughts. What are you picking up for the Players' Cup, and are you ready for some Darkness Ablaze content? Get it all down below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in another video tomorrow. Cheers.